The circus is coming to town.
Red Hot, here's where you get your Red Hot.
Daredevil acrobats, exotic trained animals, the wild men of Borneo, a fat lady paid by the pound. Watch the spectacular Barnum's Big Top tonight on The American Experience. Major funding for this series is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the financial support of viewers like you.
Corporate funding for The American Experience is provided by Aetna. For more than 135 years, a part of The American Experience.
Good evening and welcome to The American Experience. I'm David McCullough. Phineas Taylor Barnum was in his time a storekeeper, bartender, author, politician, and museum majordomo. He loved money. My prime object, he once wrote, has been to put money into my purse. He adored fame and claptrap and putting one over on the dear public. There's a sucker born every minute remains his best-known observation on life. He was called the great American showman, but he liked to describe himself as a great public benefactor, or to use his own words, a public benefactor to an extent seldom paralleled in the histories of professed and unprofessed philanthropies. And in truth, that was so. For it was P.T. Barnum, late in the last century, who brought magnitude and a sense of the exotic to American entertainment as no one ever had before. He gave America the three-ring circus, the greatest show on earth, entertainment for everyone, which is our show tonight, Barnum's Big Top. Barnum was to the show business what Andrew Jackson had been to politics, and like Andrew Jackson, he became one of the representative Americans of his time, an expansive entrepreneur in the great age of entrepreneurs. In a big and memorable way, he changed how Americans lived. He gave them something to talk about and dream about. That our own movies and television, our whole entertainment-saturated present, are what they are has a lot to do with what he started. He seems mostly a fable now, but then he did in his own day, too.
There was a time when the day the circus came to town was the biggest day of the year. Farmers in the Midwest, factory workers in New England, children in crowded cities. Everyone counted on the traveling circus to amuse and entertain them. When the circus came to town, businesses and schools would shut down so that people could follow the free parade down Main Street. In this parade came the most exotic and extravagant attractions any American could ever hope to see. Bizarre beasts from distant continents, charcoal-burning, steam-powered calliopes, 40 horses hitched in a single team pulling a $20,000 bandwagon. And perhaps most exotic of all, the men and women who worked and performed with the circus and who lived the circus life. They walked on wire. They danced on horseback. They flew through the air. They acted like they enjoyed risking their lives. They were 9 feet tall. They had 2 heads, or hair all over their bodies. They always knew the latest jokes and the latest songs. They spoke their own language and lived by their own rules in their own world. The audiences of America couldn't get enough of the circus.
Red hot. Here's where you get your red hot roasted peanuts. Those big double-jointed humpback peanuts.
By the end of the 19th century, the circus would become a major industry. But in the early days, all it took was a caravan of wagons to bring a self-contained reality into town. A small, mysterious world for just 50 cents. Americans had mixed feelings about traveling show people. They admired them. They were jealous of them. They were afraid of them. They fell in love with them. The greatest fans were probably the children. They were most likely to believe the brightly colored posters or to have crushes on the scantily clad acrobats. Kids scared their parents by trying to imitate dangerous stunts and by threatening to join the circus when it left town. Parents, too, would admire the skill of a famous bareback rider, but they could also question the moral character of these all too worldly performers. The men and women of the circus celebrated their bodies and pushed them to new limits. Performers put themselves on display in the circus in ways that weren't allowed anywhere else. In the process, they helped redefine Victorian ideas of masculine and feminine behavior. And by performing for audiences across the country, they brought their cosmopolitan attitudes to the hinterlands of America. The reputation of the circus for corruption was not entirely a matter of old-fashioned morality. Insiders said that a large percentage of circus profits in the smaller traveling shows before 1900 came from various forms of grift, cheating the customers. It started weeks before the circus ever got to town, when the advance men plastered every available surface with lithographs hyping the coming show. Although everyone knew that no circus could ever quite match its advertising, the anticipation and excitement were formidable by the time the circus hit town. The circus troupe would descend quickly, with an air of disdain for the local natives, who often seemed so out of touch with the outside world. The men who sold tickets to the anxious crowds often received no salary. In some circuses, the ticket takers even paid for the privilege. Their compensation was the money they shortchanged from the throngs. Shills were hired to get in line and push just to increase the excitement. And dips or pickpockets were permitted to operate on the midway in return for a percentage of what could be stolen. The crowd would pass the sideshow and move through the menagerie tents on their way to the big top. It was around the sideshow tent that the con artists hung out. They offered such attractions as alcohol and gambling to gullible local men. Circus people used the word rube to describe local natives who were easily swindled. Fights between the show people and the rubes were an almost daily occurrence. Circus men knew to expect violence in some towns, like Scranton, Pennsylvania, where the coal miners had a reputation for short tempers. When they felt ripped off, they'd attack with rocks and lumps of coal. Or New Haven, Connecticut, where the young men of Yale always tried some college prank. When they tried to steal a trained monkey, the circus troupe used an elephant to fight back. Brawls between circuses and rubes could last for hours, and on several notorious occasions left over 20 dead. But rarely did circus troopers let such dangers slow them down. Most of them were born into the circus, with sawdust in their veins, they said. Trained in the skills of their parents, they knew no other life. They took pride in always making it to the next town, and always putting on a show that would keep the rubes coming back year after year. Then there were those with a different vision of what the American circus could be, something more than a shady little show that gets in fights with the locals. Of these ambitious showmen, Phineas Taylor Barnum was the most visionary and the most successful. Crucial to his success with the circus was 30 years' experience running the world's most popular private museum. Everyone who went to Manhattan in the mid-1800s went to Barnum's American Museum. The most brilliant scientists and the simplest country bumpkins. European royalty and recent immigrants who could barely afford the 25-cent admission. They came to see stuffed animals, technological marvels, and supposedly ancient relics, as well as living curiosities, lions, white whales, camel leopards, leopard boys, albino families, and Siamese twins. Barnum himself was something of a living curiosity. He had cultivated a name for himself as the Prince of Humbugs. A humbug is a hoax, and Barnum was the master who mingled the scandalous, the ludicrous, and the sensational with enough education and morality to make the whole thing seem acceptable to all. Barnum's humbugs were perfectly suited to their audience. America's rapidly growing cities were starved for diversion, and at Barnum's museum people found a uniquely democratic entertainment. No one trusted the experts. Each individual decided for himself whether or not he was being bamboozled. His exhibition of the Fiji mermaid was typical. Barnum first drummed up interest by writing letters about the mermaid under false names and sending the letters to New York newspapers. Then he created advertisements based on what people might hope a mermaid would look like. What the public actually saw, after they paid their 25 cents, was the stuffed torso of a monkey skillfully sewn to the tail of a fish. Even if people suspected there would be no real mermaid, they came in droves, just to see what Phineas Taylor Barnum was up to. Barnum had the ability to repeat his success almost endlessly. On several occasions, fires reduced his museum with all of its attractions and all of his animals to nothing. But after each catastrophe, Barnum rose again on the strength of his wits and his reputation. During one of these comebacks, he decided not to rebuild his museum. Already 60 years old, Barnum began a new career in the circus. The circus had been around for a long time before Barnum decided to take it over. Men like Purdy Brown, Gilbert Spaulding, James Raymond, and Nathan Howes had already begun the process of turning European circus traditions into a profitable American business. Barnum went into business with a circus man named William Cameron Coop. Together, they combined Barnum's museum and menagerie with a traditional circus and took them on the road. It was billed as a great traveling exposition and World's Fair consisting of caravan, gallery of statuary and fine arts, Polytechnic Institute, zoological garden, and 100,000 curiosities. The actual word circus was played down to avoid any impression of vulgarity. Of his new show, Barnum said, "For many years it has been my pleasure to provide a class of instructive and amusing entertainments to which a refined Christian mother can take her children with satisfaction." Barnum advertised something for everyone: music, theater, science, fine art, clowns, trained animals, the world's greatest acrobats. Barnum combined it all into one show that would dwarf and destroy his competition. In the world of the circus, old means of transportation were holding competitors back. Horse-drawn wagons on country roads could only travel 15 to 20 miles at a time, forcing even the biggest circuses to stop and play many small, unprofitable towns. Some say it was Coop, and others say it was Barnum, who decided to bring the circus up to date to move the entire operation by rail. It had never been tried on such a huge scale. The logistics were incredible. 3 separate trains, 61 cars, 3 acres of canvas, almost 1,000 people, and hundreds of animals, all needed to be loaded, moved to the next town, and unloaded every 24 hours, with time left over for a parade and 3 performances. It fell on Coop as manager of the show to make it work. Many of the techniques developed by Coop remained in use for as long as circuses traveled by rail. A system of ramps and bridges between the railroad flat cars made it possible to load and unload the train from the ends, rather than having to hoist wagons over the side. 130 men loaded the circus trains. They were called Razorbacks, and they had highly specialized tasks: driving the horses, guiding the poles, chocking the front or the rear wheels, snubbing the brake rope. They had to work carefully to the rhythm of the trainmaster's whistle. Moving the circus by rail was even more dangerous than performing under the tent. Despite the obstacles and the dangers, Barnum and Coop grossed over $1 million in 6 months. Within a few years, Coop's railroad techniques were being adopted by other shows. The word railroad in circus advertising came to mean big, clean, and modern. Some of those who thought of circuses as dirty bohemian operations began revising their opinions. Yesterday, by the power of his presence and the magic of his golden advertising wand, Barnum transformed the hard-time dullness of our streets into the gayest of holiday airs. He peopled the waste places with a multitude of expectant faces. He delighted and instructed thousands, and finally sent everybody to bed, established in the conviction that he was the biggest-hearted and best showman in the world, and a representative American. Akron Daily Argus, 1875. Barnum's railroad circus found itself turning back customers from overcrowded tents. At the time, all circuses were one-ring circuses. All acts were trained in a standard-sized ring, only 42 feet in diameter. To squeeze more people into the tent, without enlarging the ring and retraining all the animals, Coop and Barnum added a second ring, 2 parallel circuses. Soon there were 3 rings under Barnum's big top, plus platform stages and a large oval ring called the Hippodrome track that surrounded all the others. Experiencing the 3-ring circus was like sitting in the middle of a giant machine with 1,000 moving parts. The only complaint is that there is absolutely too much to see, commented the New York Mail. And eye and brain become weary in the endeavor to follow the varied simultaneous attractions of the 3 rings. Like the bloody games of ancient Rome, races around the Hippodrome track offered violent thrills and spills. We only know that several people have been killed, wrote the New York Times. Considering the popular thirst for excitement, it is possible that several may not be reckoned too many. Zazelle the Human Cannonball was one of the first of the many daredevils who became popular with Barnum's show. Her basic technique of launching herself with an India rubber spring and using smoke and a loud bang to complete the illusion has been copied ever since. The big railroad circuses tried always to be modern. New inventions and fashionable crazes returned quickly into startling sensations.